Christmas night. Ju Wan was a man who had never known the presence of a woman in his life. His parents had been the most precious people in his world, but a car accident on Christmas Eve a few years ago had snatched them away from him. Since then, every Christmas had become nothing more than a painful memory for him. While others spent time with their families and children, Ju Wan would wander the city streets alone. His unusually tall stature kept people at a distance, deepening his sense of isolation. That night, too, he was walking aimlessly when he suddenly spotted an old man sitting by the roadside. The man was begging, dressed in an old Santa Claus costume. Ju Wan felt a pang of pity. He took out some money and dropped it into the old man's bowl. The old man looked up and smiled. "Thank you, young man." Then a strange glint appeared in his eyes. "Tell me, do you have a wish?" Ju Wan found the man a bit odd. He started to walk away without answering, but the old man's voice echoed in his ears again. "Everyone has a wish of some kind." Just to brush him off, Ju Wan said, "I want to win the lottery." The old man chuckled softly. "A lie." Ju Wan stopped in his tracks. Looking deep into his eyes, the old man said, "Tell me the true wish hidden in the depths of your heart." The old man's question stirred up the pain hidden deep within Ju Wan's heart. After a moment of silence, he spoke softly. "I just want a happy family, a beautiful wife, and a lovely daughter." A mysterious smile appeared on the old man's face. "Your wish will be granted. If it isn't, I wouldn't consider myself worthy of being called Santa." Ju Wan found this odd. He thought the old man must be a huge fan of Santa. He laughed, walked away, and headed back toward his old apartment. Even on the late-night train, his fate refused to leave him alone. The people around him were smiling with their companions. Ju Wan took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Before long, he drifted off to sleep. But who knew that it would be his final sleep on Earth? When he opened his eyes again, he was faced with iron bars. He was confined in a cage-like wagon surrounded by frail, starving people. Some looked as though they hadn't eaten in days. Ju Wan was in better shape than them, but he was stark naked. The cold air was seeping right into his bones. Just then, his gaze fell upon a dead slave nearby who was still wearing clothes. He hesitated for a moment, but finally, with trembling hands, he removed the clothes from the body and put them on. He breathed a sigh of relief as the warmth enveloped him. Then he looked at the soldiers driving the wagon. They were speaking a strange language that he couldn't understand at all. Moreover, everyone in the cage was shackled in heavy chains. Seeing this, only one thought crossed his mind: a caravan of slaves. And at that very moment, the mysterious Santa's smile flashed in his mind. A bitter expression settled on Ju Wan's face. That crazy Santa actually sent me to another world. The cold wind started blowing again. Ju Wan kept wondering whether his dream of finding a happy family as a slave would come true, or if that mysterious Santa had played a cruel joke on him. Days passed. Hunger and cold took a toll on his body. His cheeks had sunken and his face looked more frail than ever. Finally, one day, the caravan stopped at a village. The soldiers lined up all the slaves so the villagers could buy them. A tiny flicker of hope ignited within Ju Wan. At the very least, once sold, he would get regular meals. He was confident in his tall stature and strong physique. He imagined a wealthy man would buy him immediately. But reality was cruel. People came, inspected the slaves, and bought them. Yet no one even glanced his way. One village, 2 villages, 3 villages. Gradually, all the slaves who had accompanied him were sold off. In the end, only Ju Wan remained. His last shred of hope was shattered. Deep down, he began to curse the Santa who had shown him the dream of a happy life. That night, as the caravan moved on, Ju Wan quietly picked up a sharp thorn lying on the ground. He could no longer bear the pain. The thorn moved slowly toward his neck. Just then, a shadow stopped right in front of him. Ju Wan's hand froze. He lifted his head, and for a moment his breath caught in his throat. An incredibly beautiful woman stood before him. Moonlight fell upon her face, making her appear like a vision from a dream or an angel. The woman gently extended her hand. In her palm lay a small piece of bread. In that moment, Ju Wan felt that all the feasts in the world paled in comparison to that piece of bread. He took the flatbread with trembling hands and began eating hurriedly. The woman was saying something. Her voice was gentle. Yet Ju Wan could not understand a single word. They spoke languages from different worlds, and yet, for the first time in days, he felt that perhaps there was someone in this strange world who cared about him. Ju Hee-won couldn't understand a word the woman was saying, but the language wasn't the reason. His entire attention was captivated by the woman's beauty and the small, adorable girl standing beside her. The woman held a piece of bread in her hand, and at that moment it seemed more precious to him than a meal from any 3-Michelin-star restaurant. A short while ago, inside a dilapidated wooden house, the woman was having dinner with her young daughter. Food was scarce. The woman gave her own portion to the child, but the girl held half the bread back out to her. "Mommy should eat too." Liz's eyes welled up slightly. Just then, there was a loud knocking at the door. Thud, thud. Liz opened the door. The village chief was standing outside. "Don't open the door. Just listen to me." His voice was grave. "The soldiers have brought a caravan of slaves. One of those men will be chosen as your new husband. Come with me to the mountain in the morning and have food ready for the soldiers too." Hearing this, Liz turned pale. Her previous marriage had been nothing short of hell. She had been beaten and humiliated daily, enduring constant pain. For a moment, the thought of running away crossed her mind. But then her gaze fell upon her daughter. The child wasn't her own flesh and blood. She was the daughter of her late husband's first wife. Yet, she couldn't just leave her behind. Perhaps the child sensed her distress. She ran over and wrapped her small arms around Liz in a hug. At that moment, tears streamed down Liz's face. She tucked the child into bed and gazed at her for a long time. The child didn't even have a name yet. And that was precisely what frightened her the most. If the new husband turned out to be just like the first one, her life might well become a nightmare all over again. Liz was reminded of her past, of the time her father had sold her for nothing more than a rabbit skin. A man living in the mountains had bought her. As soon as she arrived at his home, he began to beat her. From that day on, her life was filled with constant abuse and pain. Had that little girl not come into her life, she might have broken down long ago. Then one day, her husband went hunting and never returned. Later, the village headman revealed that a wild animal had killed him. His body was never even found. Upon hearing this news, Liz breathed a sigh of relief for the first time. She believed her nightmare had finally ended, but now it seemed as though a new nightmare was knocking at her door. Liz felt a sense of relief upon hearing the news of her husband's death, but her happiness was short-lived. In this world, a woman held no standing without a husband. Yet, thinking of her daughter, she resolved to face her fate once more. The next morning, she baked some bread and went out to the soldiers. Her heart shuddered the moment she laid eyes on the wagon carrying the slaves. A man was about to take his own life by driving a sharp spike into his neck. The sight reopened old wounds. There had been a time when she, too, had contemplated doing the very same thing. Without a moment's hesitation, Liz rushed toward him and stopped him. As she drew closer, she noticed the man's sunken cheeks, disheveled hair, and the despair lurking in his eyes. Silently, she held out a piece of her bread to him. But before she could say a word, the village chief arrived. He ordered Liz to return to her hut and took charge of the slave trading himself. Liz and the little girl cast one last glance at the man before walking away. They had no idea that the man was Ju Huan. Ju Huan stared at the bread in his hand for a long moment. Only a short while ago, he had wanted to die, and now a stranger had given him a reason to live. His entire focus was on the bread, yet he could not bring himself to take even a single bite. The soldiers dragged him out. Soon, he was kneeling before the village chief alongside 2 other slaves. Armed soldiers stood guard all around them. Just then, a soldier stepped forward. He drew a knife and made a shallow cut on each of their arms. A few drops of blood were dripped onto 2 special sheets of paper. The very next instant, the papers began to glow with a soft blue light. Zhu Huan's eyes widened. He had never seen a sight like this before. Magic? Countless questions began to swirl in his mind. What kind of world had he ended up in? A world where humans were enslaved and sold, and where mysterious contracts that glowed with the color of blood existed. Once the contract was finalized, a soldier leaned in and whispered something into the village chief's ear. The chief nodded silently. Then his gaze fell upon Ju Huan. He began to walk slowly toward him, as if a significant decision had already been made. Meanwhile, Liz returned to the hut with her daughter. A short while later, a village woman arrived with rations to last them several days. Smiling, she said, "Your new husband doesn't speak our language. You'll face some communication difficulties at first." Liz remained silent. Anxiety was still clearly visible on her face. Seeing this, the woman tried to reassure her. "He may look ordinary, but his hands are as soft as a nobleman's. And don't worry, your previous husband was notorious throughout the village. People only tolerated him because he was the guardian of the mountain. She paused briefly before adding, "If your new husband performs that duty well, perhaps the two of you can live out the rest of your lives in comfort." Liz replied in a low voice, "I don't expect him to be a saint. I just want him not to be violent." Just then, the door to the hut opened. The village chief stepped inside. Standing behind him was a massive man. Liz's eyes widened. It was the very same man she had saved from death a short while ago, but now seeing him up close, she realized just how huge and intimidating his physique was. Involuntarily, her hands began to tremble. Across from her, Ju Huan recognized her as well. She was the woman who had given him bread, yet he couldn't understand why she looked so nervous upon seeing him. Then the village chief stepped forward. He took Ju Huan's hand and positioned him in front of Liz. He then lifted Liz's hand and clasped their palms together. The little girl stood between them. In that moment, they truly looked like an unusual family. Ju Huan didn't understand a single word of their language, but seeing the smiles of the people around him, the chief's look of satisfaction and Liz's bashful expression, he understood one thing. Someone had got him married. Ju Heaven finally remembered what that mysterious Santa had said. He had promised to give him a wife as lovely as a rabbit and a daughter as cute as a weasel.